Hello and welcome to the ZT Now special. My guest today is one of Indian IT's tallest leaders and a man in the hot seat, quite literally. Ravi Venkatesan, such a pleasure chatting with you. It's been, 4 months since your appointment as the co-chairman of Infosys. What's the experience been like and how do you see the company over the last 4 months?
Well, never a dull moment, for sure. Yeah, I've spent much of these 4 months really getting into a more detailed, nuanced understanding. And, if I were to try and explain to our audience what's really going on in Infosys, which is there at least in a few minds, the way I would now sum it up is 2 words. One is about transitions, the other is about transformation. We're in a very unusual journey. On one hand, in 2014, when looking back, at that moment actually we were not very conscious of it. In 2014, the company went through 3 transitions concurrently. And the first was the founder and co-founders leaving the company all at the same time. And with them walked out a huge amount of the institutional knowledge that we had. The second one was we got a new CEO. Now, most of us who've been through these transitions know that CEO succession is a delicate one in the best of times. And here we had, for the first time in the history of the company, a professional CEO. One who had not grown up from the inside, but came in from the outside. That too, not IT services, but more of a software background. And although Vishal is in some ways Indian, his heart is Indian, his name is Indian, he's really quite American. So, we had all these things in the cocktail around CEO succession. And the third one is, again, it's all blindingly clear in retrospect and hindsight. We've gone from being an executive board to a non-executive board. At the time when I joined the board of Infosys, 2011, there were 6 people who were hands-on, Chris and Shibu and Bala and then later on, pretty soon after that, it was Ashok Vemuri and BG Srinivas. So, the amount of micro knowledge of the company on the board was enormous. Today, what do we have? We have 2 executives and the rest are non-executive. Okay, and that is, again, a non-trivial challenge. And many of the issues that we have experienced, I think, are because of the consequence of these transitions. On the other hand, at the same time, we're seeing transformation. Vishal was brought in by Murthy and Kamath, essentially to drive a transformation of Infosys. And he set off with extraordinary energy, lots of initiatives, 2020 goals, a bold new strategy, etc. And then I think somewhere in that sort of passion and energy, he and all of us collectively, we didn't think through the cultural dimensions of this transformation. And as Peter Drucker has said, and it's one of my favorite quotes, culture trumps strategy. And so again, in hindsight, we could have done a much better job of, for instance, aligning all stakeholders, including founders, behind the new direction, making sure that the new people who Vishal brought in to fill in talent gaps were, more thoughtfully integrated into a single team with the people who had also built the company, etc.
Many people, in the investor community especially, were hopeful that in these 4 months you'd be able to address the concerns as far as the founder group is concerned. But relations still appear to be in a slightly sticky wicket. What's happening on that front?
Well, I've got to be honest. When I think about the founder and the founders, first thing is, I'm at 54 years old. And for Indians of my generation, your generation, the defining company was Infosys, right? And therefore, one holds the people who built this extraordinary company in great admiration. And so that's fact number 1. Fact number 2 is Murthy's been a very close mentor and friend of, for 10 years. The fact that I'm even on the board is because after I left Microsoft, he tapped me and said, now maybe you can join us. So I have a great deal of, personal regard and affection for him. The third thing to recognize when you think about the founder, which is Mr. Murthy, is founders are different from you and I and normal CEOs and so forth. The company they built is an expression of themselves. I saw this first with Bill Gates, when I was working in Microsoft. Very much the same thing. So they are deeply identified with the company they built. And in fact, Murthy himself has sometimes said, Infosys is my middle child. And so we've got to recognize, and I do, that he's not just a stakeholder, he's not just a promoter. I think those words don't
do justice to him.
Justice to the passion he has for what he has created. And he is still sharper than almost anybody else I know, and extraordinary ideas. And my challenge, I think the management challenge, the board challenge, is to take those ideas and decide which ones of them fit and how to implement it. That doesn't mean we will agree on every single idea. And there Murthy has also told me, he said, listen, Ravi, your job is to hear out all ideas from all stakeholders. You don't have to agree with them, but you need to argue them out. And eventually, you do what you think is right, but ask yourself, will this decision enhance respect for Infosys? And if it does, I'm with you. So I think on most things, we agree, sometimes vigorously agree. On a couple of questions, issues, I think we do have a different perspective, and hopefully dialogue will resolve those.
All right. You seem to be painting a picture that at least appears to be far better than what it appears to the outside world. But let's talk about the specific issue that you said where there appears to be a disagreement, which is on making the entire Panaya investigation report public. Mr. Murthy, we understand, we reported the story, is written to the board asking it to be made public.
We have thought about that suggestion, and we have decided that that is not appropriate, not prudent. And as I try to think of any other company which has put its investigations into a whistleblower complaint on its website, or even Infosys for that matter, I'm hard pressed to think of that. So, which is why we've taken a view that the manner of in which we have disclosed is appropriate. Now, it is entirely possible that somebody is still not satisfied, and if there's any shred of evidence that they have, I would suggest that they should be more forthcoming and bring it to either the attention of the regulator or Gibson Dunn or anyone else so that it can be looked at. But in the absence of that, I think we have to presume people are innocent until proven guilty. And if you keep sort of at this, at some point it degenerates to a witch hunt.
Sure. I get that point, Ravi, but the point that Narayan Murthy has always made is that when in doubt, please disclose. It's one of the foundations on which he's built the corporate governance structure of this company. And Infosys then and even now is regarded as a company with very high corporate governance standards.
Yes.
What is the downside of disclosing? Why the hesitation to disclose? If
we have disclosed.
The entire report.
No, well, the entire report contains an enormous amount of detail, okay, and that is not deemed advisable.
Okay, so you've got legal opinion that sort of indicates that you should
Indeed.
not. All right. The other question that I wanted to ask you is the comments made by Vishal Sikka, the CEO, in a letter to employees last week on sort of letting go, and which was interpreted as a sort of indication to founders that probably they need to let go. Does the board feel that the founder group needs to give it more freedom, the board and the management team more freedom to work? Is that a
First of all, I've heard of this, but I've quite honestly not actually read the letter, and I don't know the context in which Vishal may or may not have made those remarks about letting go. Presumably, it is in the context of the need for Infosys to reinvent itself, and but again, I'm at a loss in terms of answering this.
Sure. Okay. What are the current status as far as issues with the founder group is concerned? How because they've also indicated again through unofficial sources that they may look at even selling their stake in Infosys. Has the board received any such communication?
I think
from
this
them?
is quite an old narrative because it was in June that there were some rumors. The board or the company has not received any formal intimation, and Mr. Murthy himself, if I recollect, denied any such thing. So I'm surprised that there's still
talk on that.
Okay.
Mr. Murthy, in the interim, has also gone on record to say that he regrets having left the company in 2014 and that he should have listened to his other colleagues at the time and stayed back. How do you read that comment? And would the board be open to having him back in the company in some form as a mentor or any such? Is that something that the board would be open to?
See, again, this is something I need to sit down quietly one day and have a cup of tea and understand. But as I said, it's not surprising to me. If you look at Microsoft, Bill stepped back as CEO early 2000s, but he stayed on as chair for a while, and he's still on the board as a director, as an independent. He's no longer the chair. And, I feel he seems to feel that that is important for the sake of continuity and so forth. So this is, I think founders enjoy that emotional connection with their creation. So it doesn't surprise me greatly. I've also said that Mr. Murthy has enormous passion and ideas for the industry, for the company. And I think he's an important stakeholder, and it's my duty to
But
listen.
would the board be open to give a formal arrangement? Because that could sort of, in a sense, solve a lot of these issues that you're currently, facing in terms of board-founder relations.
Yeah, well, if he were to wish that, we would absolutely consider it.
But he hasn't obviously indicated anything to that effect.
No.
All right. There's a lot of misperception on the role of Cyril Shroff. The board appointed Mr. Cyril Shroff to look at certain matters, and the perception in the market is that he's sort of this someone who's mediating as far as ties between the board and the founder group is concerned. Could you clear the air on what has happened with that particular on that issue?
Yeah, so Cyril Shroff of Cyril Amachan Mangaldas was, they helped looked into some of the early whistleblower complaints, and they did 2 investigations into the Rajiv Bansal severance agreement and so forth. Then later on, there was a discussion about engaging Cyril to come up with a framework for the board to consult with investors in an equal manner. But that's something that we haven't really taken up with any vigor. So at this point, he is a counsel to the board. But we don't feel the need for a mediator to talk to anyone, whether it's the founder or any other investor. So I think that is a misperception on the part of some people.
But has the founder group also expressed interest in a wider representation in the board? Have they sort of suggested people who should be inducted into the board? And is there an effort to widen the the people in the board? Is that something that...
No, they haven't. But if they were to suggest
Names.
names, we would absolutely again consider it. See, the board is got a certain natural churn. You've got,
as people retire.
Yeah, you've got people coming off the board next year. That creates opportunities to bring new people. I think we're quite thoughtful about the kinds of profiles and skills and competencies and perspectives that would benefit us right now. And so we're open to names and suggestions from everywhere, and certainly from the founder group as well.
Ravi, even if you put this cultural issue aside, one of the other concerns raised is on performance as well of the CEO. Would you say that there is a gap between strategy and execution over the last 3 years, and what is the company now doing to fix it?
Yeah, as I said, performance is a subjective thing, and it's the glass both half full and half empty. When we compare ourselves with our peer group, the short-term performance is pretty decent. When you look at what is our performance against a set of transformational goals that we had publicly set out, well, there's a gap, and it's our trajectory is disappointing. I've said it in public that we are not shying away from the 2020 goals, but it's unlikely to be achieved by the year 2020. So clearly, we've stepped back and spent quite a lot of time with Vishal and the management team reflecting on where we need to course correct, both from a strategy perspective as well as an execution perspective. I'm personally quite bullish about our growth prospects, all that whole sort of thing I said at the very front end of our conversation. There's plenty of opportunity for growth in new areas, and it's about rapidly moving our resources and talent into that. And so there's a big execution challenge there. But Infi historically has been quite good at execution, not quite good, astonishingly good at execution. So this is not something that profoundly worries me. I think we should be able to accomplish that.
But this whole founder, I'm sort of going back to it, but this whole founder board, a difference of opinion, is it not exasperating at one level for the board to have to deal with it constantly? You put an issue across and something else comes up and something else comes up. It's just, from an outside world, it appears as if it's a never-ending saga. So is it exasperating at one level?
Well, clearly, if you're going to succeed at this transformation, we need everybody aligned, okay, in a common direction. And that is non-trivial. And what you're talking about is an example of misalignment. And so somewhere we absolutely have to figure out how to make the founder group and indeed all significant investors, into a tailwind rather than a headwind. That's kind of the number one
But what
task.
more can the board do? I'm trying to understand what is it that the board hasn't done that it could do. Do you have any such levers as well to mend this relationship?
I think this this set of issues that we've talked about around Panaya and the Gibson investigation, hopefully is one of the residual issues. I think in terms of the way forward, there isn't much, by way of misalignment. So I'm an optimist. I'm genuinely hopeful that we will see greater and greater convergence.
The other concern on the street, Ravi, is on the spate of high-level exits, especially of people who even Vishal brought to the company, people whom he had sort of handpicked, and these are not sort of mid-level people, but fairly senior level people, and that sort of in a sense questions the leadership in the company.
Yeah.
What do you attribute these exits to?
It's interesting, right? I sort of worry about with every exit of a senior person. It's something you really don't feel good about and so forth. But when you actually examine the data, it's quite interesting. The macro data is that the attrition rate of senior level employees when Vishal joined was about 15%, and now it's about 11%. Okay, so at that level, the data is not terribly worrying. But then you have to look at each individual case and say, could we have done something different, better, whatever? And overall, is this a trend that you should begin to pay attention to? My view is that there are two reasons. One is this is an industry in great churn and change. Every company is trying to transform itself. We're not the only ones. And they look around at each other for talent. And so you're seeing a fair amount of poaching and so forth going on. And Infi happens to be a pretty good place to hunt for good leaders because over the years the company has done a fine job hiring, developing talent. So you look at where our people are going, and they're doing extremely well. You look at a number of CEOs, and you can think about right from BG and Ashok Vemuri to Sanjay Jalona to a whole bunch of people. They've done quite well. And so one part of me says this is normal and we should rejoice that our alums are doing so well. The other part is, to be honest, transformations are difficult. And during transformational change, there's a lot of discomfort. And therefore, there is some attrition. And particularly when you have a strong culture and you bring people from the outside at senior levels, there are challenges of integration. And so we've got to figure out, are we doing enough to integrate? And I said this right at the very beginning. People that we're bringing in to fill specific skill gaps at a senior leadership level. Are we doing enough to integrate old and new and create a single team? I think there's work there.
So you don't think that they were structurally misfits, that these people who came in who had...
No, I don't think so. I think that when you hire a person, you tend to be quite careful. And you make sure, one of the things you do is make sure that you're hiring somebody who's got a track record of being successful. People who have left are all excellent people. Of the caliber that I've worked with at Microsoft and other such places. The issue is not the individual. It's a question of, are you doing enough to make it fit? And at a time of change, is the emotional connect with a lot of people there. Okay, I think that is really important, and we probably should be doing 10 times as much. So I've asked Vishal to step on that a bit, and certainly all of us at the board have to make sure that we are connected with a larger group of people.
Sure. I want to go back to something that you spoke about earlier, which is on Vishal's performance operationally. And what would you say to critics like sort of someone like a Mohan Das Pai, who is now on public questioning his capability as a leader? So not so much about the board issue, but just his own performance as a leader. Would you ask them to give him more time to execute his vision for the company, or is the board keeping a close eye on his
It's a very uncomfortable question, because I don't think it's appropriate to do a performance appraisal of a CEO of a public company in this forum. Like any leader, Vishal has some extraordinary skills. And like any leader, he's got areas which are not strengths. Successful leaders build a team around themselves to round themselves out in areas where they need help. Even Murthy, one of my earliest mentoring conversations, he says, we built a team that was mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Our head spun a bit, but what he meant is the genius of Infosys was not just one person, but the combination of him and Nandan and Pai and Shibu and whatever. It was the team which stayed together for 3 decades or more that accomplished it. So I think the challenge for Vishal is how does he build a team around him that is cohesive, committed to this transformation, that is collectively very strong. And if he can do that, I think he's going to be successful.
But so would it be fair to say that the board is backing him fully and that the board has no sort of apprehension on his performance, competence, capability in any way?
I think it is the responsibility of the board to back its CEO fully until it decides it doesn't back. It's binary. Okay? It has to shift from 1 to 0. This thing about 0.75, 0.25 backing and all is a very, very dangerous thing and an unhealthy thing. So we are backing Vishal, and we're hopeful, particularly with this new structure of the board that we've created called the Committee of Directors, to work closely with the management team. We were I feel encouraged.
Right. Since you've spoken about the Committee of Directors, the Committee of Directors is looking at that target that Vishal had set for himself and the company, the 2020 target. What's the progress there? Have you had a chance to relook at those targets? Will the timeline, the goalposts be shifted, or will the target itself be relooked at?
Yeah. See, one of the most important things that we need to do is guide expectations well. And that's not just about industry-leading margins and industry-leading growth, but in terms of the transformation that we wish to achieve, we have to guide people well. One of the things that Satya Nadella at Microsoft has done spectacularly well is said, hey, this is what you should expect from Microsoft. Don't worry about the decline of Windows. Watch what we do on cloud services and how we close the gap there.
Sure.
And he's done well. So I think our goal should be by October timeframe to be able to clearly articulate what is the transformation of vision out there, what does the roadmap look like, what are recognizable milestones, so we know whether we are on track or not. And so we're putting in a fair amount of effort to accomplish that.
Sure. The other things on acquisitions, and the company sort of started becoming more aggressive when it comes to acquisitions in 2015, largely to acquire digital capabilities. And then, of course, this whole cloud of controversy surrounding the Panaya deal. Is it going to force the company to sort of backtrack on its strategy, be more cautious on acquisitions?
No.
How do you balance the two?
Like any good company, we've reflected on our strategy. Right? Strategy is not something where you just decide that you want to go north and eventually you end up there. You have to feel your way to the future. And so there was a presumptive hypothesis around software and services. There was a great deal of energy and focus on artificial intelligence and so forth. I'm still excited about that. But along the way, we've said, listen, we shouldn't overlook the short, near-term opportunity of services-led growth in a whole bunch of areas. And in those areas, I think there's really an opportunity to bulk up with small and modest size acquisitions. So the kind that we did just last week, Brilliant Basics, this digital design studio, is perhaps illustrative of the kind of acquisitions that we will do more of.
Sure.
So there's I would think of it as a pivot to a new direction. But no, I don't think we're going to shy away from making acquisitions where it builds capability. But they're not going to be these giant acquisitions which are hard to integrate and swallow. It's more likely to be lots of smaller ones, singles.
Sure. While the board, Ravi, is committed to a buyback of $2 billion to shareholders this year, the progress on the buyback itself has been pretty slow. Is this because of regulatory constraints, or will you look at a simpler way of going about this?
Right. So that's a great question. I think it was April 13th that we announced our capital allocation policy, 13,000 crores that we would give back to shareholders. And clearly the buyback route is more tax efficient. The challenge for us is to much greater extent than any other IT company. We're listed in multiple exchanges. The regulatory thing, has some contradictions. So Ranga, our CFO, is working through all that. It has taken longer than we anticipated. But we're very, very hopeful of being able to have positive news for investors very soon, certainly no later than mid-October.
Okay, no later than mid-October. The current chairman, Sesha Sai's term ends in May 2018, and obviously in the last AGM he did indicate that he's going to be there till May 2018. So, is there any change in that timeline? Is he on track to complete his full term?
The last I checked, Sesha is intending to complete his full term.
All right. So, a lot of observers believe that once his term expires, the next obvious question is who's going to be the next chairman, and people see you as the next chairman of Infosys, and maybe even at an executive capacity to obviously support the management team of the company. Would you be open to such a role?
Look, this is a very dynamic situation, and lots will change between now and May. So, I certainly don't want to sit here predicting anything. When the time comes, the board, I'm sure, will apply its mind.
But the board has not applied its mind on this issue as of now.
As of now, I think the board will take a call at that time.
Such a pleasure chatting with you, Ravi. Thank you so much for the chat. Thank you so much.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/etnow.